Hi everyone, Carl here, and in this video I will be adding a face to the miniature I was sculpting over the last few videos. Once again, I have to apologize in advance for the poor quality of the footage. Filming a sculpt is much harder than I thought, and I ended up with around 70 minutes of footage that mostly showed my fingers or the working mat. I hope the instructions and the remaining footage are of some use. Like every other part of the miniature, I worked in layers. This is especially important for the face, because any face has a whole lot of tiny details clustered together. The first thing I did was to lay down some putty on the knob that I had prepared on the armature, and start to form a skeletal structure. At this stage I was not looking for the final detail, and only focused on making some eye sockets, shaping the ridges around the eye, and defining the upper jaw. It really looked more like a caricature of a skull at this stage. The only detail I did add at this stage was on the inside of the mouth, marking some teeth with a needle point and pressing out a tongue. Since I wanted the figure to look like it had a broken jaw, I waited till the putty had hardened a little, but not completely cured, and gently pushed the lower jaw and mouth to one side, and then I built up the cheeks and the chin. When I had the lower jaw defined, I could then figure out where to attach the ears. In this case, I just added two small balls of putty, blended them in, and then pressed in some ridges inside them, making sure to leave the outer C-shape intact. After this, I added the upper lip by pressing a thin sausage of putty just under the nose and smoothing it in place. To make the eyes, I added a tiny ball of putty in one socket, and I do mean tiny, and pressed it in to form the eyeball and the upper eyelid. A more sensible person would probably use a tiny bearing and just add eyelids on top. To keep with the beaten up prizefighter theme, I wanted to make the other eye swollen. This was simple enough, as I just had to slop two lumps of putty over the eye and smooth them in. I also added some more putty over the other eye to make the ridge a bit stronger. I left everything to cure overnight, and then refined the shape of the head with a blade. Then I started adding a bit more volume anywhere I thought needed it, mainly the cheeks and the forehead. I also added another really tiny piece of putty into the open eye, shaping it into a lower eyelid. To make the nose, I used a thin strip of putty and blended it in above the eyes, into the eye sockets, and at the lip. I then used a pointy bit to press up the nostrils. This isn't so much about giving the guy nostril holes, but more about the external shape, as any amount of putty you try to add here will probably be way too much. I rounded this off by adding a few muscles on the neck to join everything together. And that's more or less it for this guy. I hope you're not sick of him yet, because I still want to cast and paint him, so he might show up in a couple more videos, ideally after I take a short break. I also hope you found this series of videos useful, or at least interesting. If you have any questions or suggestions, drop me a comment below and I'll do my best to answer. Once again, thank you for watching and have a great day.